The dusty light of dawn crept through the tiny window, casting feeble rays across Zara Holloway's prison, a converted storage shed attached to her family's sprawling ranch house in Yerington, Nevada. At 23, Zara had spent the last 3 years confined within these walls, her crime nothing more than the size of her body, which her father declared an embarrassment to the Holloway name. As she traced her fingers along the rough-hewn pine boards that enclosed her, she wondered if anyone in the bustling town beyond their property even remembered she existed. The year was 1878, and the Nevada Territory had become a state 14 years prior. But on the Holloway Ranch, Zara might as well have been living in another world entirely. She had once dreamed of traveling to San Francisco, of wearing beautiful dresses and dancing at balls, but those dreams seemed as distant as the stars she could barely glimpse through her window at night. "Breakfast," announced her mother's tired voice as a tray slid through the small opening at the bottom of the door. Meager portions. Always meager, because according to her father, starvation was the cure for what ailed her. "Thank you, Mother," Zara replied softly, though she doubted the woman lingered to hear her gratitude. Martha Holloway had once been a source of comfort, but years under Theodore Holloway's tyrannical rule had reduced her to little more than his shadow. Zara approached the tray, her body moving with a natural grace that belied her father's cruel assertions about her clumsiness. At 5 feet 8 inches tall with a full figure, she was indeed larger than the fashionable silhouette of the day demanded, but there was nothing grotesque about her appearance. Her curves were proportionate, her face heart-shaped and pretty with deep blue eyes that reflected both sorrow and stubborn hope. She ate slowly, savoring each bite of dry bread and lukewarm porridge. Food was both enemy and friend. Her father restricted it as punishment, but she found comfort in it during her darkest hours. The irony wasn't lost on her. Outside, she could hear the ranch coming alive, ranch hands calling to one another, horses neighing, her father's booming voice directing the day's work. The Holloway Cattle Ranch was one of the most prosperous in the county, a fact Theodore lorded over his neighbors at every opportunity. His obsession with appearances was what had led to Zara's imprisonment when she'd failed to secure a husband by 20, her father claiming her figure was to blame. "No man wants a wife who will eat him out of house and home," he'd declared the day he'd first locked her away. "Until you learn some discipline, you'll stay where no one can see our shame." A familiar sound caught Zara's attention, the approach of a wagon, wheels creaking over the packed dirt of the ranch yard. Visitors were rare, especially this early in the day. She moved to her window, stretching on tiptoe to peer out, but could see nothing from her limited vantage point. Then she heard a man's voice, unfamiliar, deep, with a slight drawl that marked him as not local to Nevada. "Looking for work," the voice said. "Heard you might be hiring, Mr. Holloway." "We could use another hand," her father replied, his tone businesslike. "Cattle drive starting next week, pays fair if the work is good. That's all I ask." Something about that voice made Zara's heart beat faster. There was a quiet confidence in it, a dignity that stood in stark contrast to her father's blustering authority. She strained to hear more, but the conversation moved away from her shed, leaving her once again alone with her thoughts. The day passed slowly, as all days did in her confinement. Zara read from her small collection of books, treasures her mother had smuggled to her over the years. She practiced her embroidery, though she had little interest in the feminine art her mother insisted would make her more marriageable. And she wrote in her journal, pouring out dreams and frustrations onto the precious pages. As evening approached, she heard footsteps outside her door, not her mother's light tread, but heavier, uncertain steps. She froze, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. "Miss." The voice from earlier that day, now low and cautious. "Is someone in there?" Zara hesitated. Speaking to strangers was forbidden, but something in that voice called to her. "Yes," she whispered, approaching the door. "Who are you?" There was a pause. "Name's Samuel Vance, just hired on today." Another pause. "Why are you locked in here?" The simple question brought unexpected tears to her eyes. No one had asked her that before, not the ranch hands who surely knew of her existence, not the rare visitors who might have heard her moving about. "I'm Zara Holloway," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'm Theodore Holloway's daughter, his daughter." The surprise in Samuel's voice was evident. Why would he keep his daughter locked up? Shame heated her cheeks, but she forced herself to answer. "Because I'm too large. Too big to find a husband, an embarrassment," he says. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Then, quietly, "That's the most foolish thing I've ever heard." A sound escaped Zara, half laugh, half sob. "You haven't seen me." "Don't need to," Samuel replied, his voice firm. "No one deserves to be locked away, especially not for something like that." Footsteps approached from the main house, and Samuel whispered quickly, "I'll be back," before his boots scuffed away across the dirt. That night, Zara could barely sleep. Samuel Vance's words played in her mind again and again. No one deserves to be locked away. After 3 years of internalizing her father's cruelty, hearing someone a stranger declare it wrong stirred something within her that she'd thought long dead. Hope. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Zara found herself listening for Samuel's voice among the ranch hands, catching snippets of conversation as men passed by her shed. She learned he was working with the horses, that he had a way with even the most difficult mounts. She heard grudging respect in the other hand's comments about the new man's skills. As dusk fell, her door rattled softly. "Miss Holloway." "Mr. Vance," she answered, moving quickly to the door. "You came back, said I would." There was a pause. "Your father's gone to town for the evening." "The foreman too." Zara's heart quickened. "My mother in the house, but she took a sleeping powder for her headache." "How do you know all this?" She could almost hear his smile. "Been listening, watching, learning how this place works." "Why?" Another pause. "Because what's happening to you isn't right." Zara leaned her forehead against the rough wood of the door. "There's nothing to be done about it. This is my life now. Doesn't have to be." The determination in his voice startled her. "I can get you out of here." "And then what?" Zara asked, her practical nature asserting itself despite the wild hope blooming in her chest. "Where would I go? I have no money, no friends outside this ranch. My father would find me." "I've been thinking on that," Samuel said. "I wasn't planning to stay here long. I'm heading to California after the cattle drive. San Francisco, you could come with me." "With you?" The very idea was scandalous. "We don't even know each other." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know keeping someone prisoner for how they look is wrong. I know you deserve better." Zara closed her eyes, her mind racing. "Why would you help me? What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Samuel answered, his voice gentle. "Sometimes doing what's right is its own reason." She wanted to believe him. 3 years of captivity had taught her caution, but something about Samuel Vance, his voice, his directness inspired trust she couldn't explain. "Give me time to think," she finally said. "Not much time to give," he replied. "Cattle drive leaves in 5 days. Decision needs to be made before then." After he left, Zara paced her small room, thoughts tumbling over each other. Escape had been a distant fantasy for so long that the possibility of it actually happening terrified her almost as much as it exhilarated her. Freedom. The word itself felt foreign on her tongue. The next morning, her mother brought breakfast as usual, but her movements seemed hurried, nervous. "Mother," Zara questioned, "is everything all right?" Martha Holloway glanced over her shoulder before whispering, "That new ranch hand was asking about you, about why you're kept here." Zara's stomach tightened. What did father say? He didn't hear, but Zara. Her mother's eyes, so like her own, filled with tears. "Be careful, your father would," she stopped herself. "Just be careful." Before Zara could respond, her mother was gone, the door secured behind her. Throughout the day, Zara could hear unusual activity, her father shouting more than usual, men being reassigned to different tasks. Had Samuel's questions raised suspicions? The thought made her blood run cold. If her father suspected anyone of interfering with his solution to his daughter's perceived failings, his retribution would be swift and merciless. Night fell without a visit from Samuel. Zara tried to quell her disappointment, telling herself it was safer this way. Perhaps he'd reconsidered the risk, realized the foolishness of antagonizing Theodore Holloway. She was preparing for bed when she heard a soft scratching at her window. Cautiously, she approached and peered out to see Samuel's face in the dim moonlight. "Can't come to the door tonight," he whispered. "Your father's got men watching the shed." "I feared as much," Zara replied. "Someone told him you were asking questions." Samuel nodded grimly. "Makes what I'm planning harder, but not impossible." "What are you planning, getting you out?" "Tomorrow night," Zara gasped. "So soon?" "Has to be. Your father's suspicious now. He's planning to move you somewhere more secure after the cattle drive begins. Heard him telling your mother." Cold fear washed over her. "Move me where?" Didn't say. "But I got the impression it would be somewhere no one would find you." The implications of that were too terrible to consider. If her father was willing to imprison her on his own property, what might he do if he believed that confinement was no longer secure? "What should I do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Pack whatever you can carry in a small bundle. Be ready after midnight tomorrow when everyone's asleep." "The door is locked from the outside," Zara reminded him, "and the window is too small." Samuel's eyes, dark in the moonlight, held hers. "I'll handle the door, just be ready." After he disappeared into the night, Zara sat on her bed, her heart pounding. Was she truly considering this? Leaving the only home she'd ever known, fleeing with a man she'd never even seen properly. Yet the alternative, being moved to some unknown location, perhaps never seeing daylight again, was unthinkable. She slept fitfully and woke to the sound of raised voices. Through her window, she could see her father confronting a group of ranch hands, Samuel among them. Even from a distance, Samuel cut an impressive figure, tall and broad-shouldered, his stance confident even as Theodore Holloway jabbed a finger at his chest. "You work for me, boy," her father was saying, his voice carrying across the yard. "That means you do as I say when I say it, and you don't ask questions that ain't your business." "Yes, sir," Samuel replied, his tone respectful but not cowed. "Just trying to understand how things work around here." "Things work how I say they work," Theodore snapped. "You got a problem with that? There's the road." Samuel nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "No problem, sir." Zara watched as the men dispersed, her father stalking back toward the main house. Samuel glanced briefly toward her window before following the other ranch hands toward the corral. Even that fleeting look conveyed a message. Be ready. The day crept by with excruciating slowness. Zara carefully selected the few possessions she couldn't bear to leave behind: her journal, a locket containing a miniature portrait of her mother, a small book of poetry. She folded her warmest shawl and her spare dress into a bundle, then hid it under her bed. Every sound from outside made her jump, certain her father had somehow discovered their plan. When her mother brought her evening meal, Zara searched the older woman's face for any sign of knowledge or suspicion, but found only the usual resigned sadness. "Mother," Zara said impulsively as Martha turned to leave. "If you could leave here, would you?" Martha froze, her hand on the door. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one," Zara replied softly. Her mother turned slowly, eyes wide with fear. "Has someone been putting ideas in your head, girl?" "No," Zara lied. "I just wonder sometimes if there's more to life than this." Martha approached her daughter, taking Zara's hands in her own. "Listen to me," she whispered urgently. "Your father is not a man to cross. He would find you, and what he would do then." She shook her head, unable to continue. "But don't you ever want more?" Zara pressed. "Wanting doesn't change what is." Martha squeezed her daughter's hands. "Be smarter than I was, Zara. Find a way to make peace with your lot." After her mother left, Zara sat in the growing darkness, turning their conversation over in her mind. Make peace with your lot. Was that truly the only option? To accept imprisonment as her due because she didn't fit her father's idea of what a daughter should be? No. Samuel's words echoed in her mind. No one deserves to be locked away. Midnight came and went. Zara sat fully dressed on her bed, her small bundle beside her, straining to hear any approaching footsteps. 1 hour passed, then another. Had something gone wrong? Had Samuel been caught, or worse, had he abandoned his plan altogether? Just as despair began to creep in, she heard a soft scraping at her door, followed by the distinctive sound of metal against metal. Someone was working at the lock. "Samuel," she whispered. "Hold on," came his quiet reply. "This lock's trickier than I expected." After several tense minutes, there was a soft click. The door, however, didn't open. "There's something else holding it shut," Samuel muttered, "a bar or bolt on the outside." "My father added it last year," Zara confirmed, her hope fading, "after I tried to pick the lock myself." There was a moment of silence then. "Stand back from the door." "What are you going to?" Before she could finish, there was a tremendous crash as Samuel's boot connected with the door near the hinges. Wood splintered but held. Another kick, and the top hinge gave way. A third, and the door hung precariously from its lower hinge. "Samuel, the noise," Zara whispered frantically. "No choice now," he replied, his voice tight with exertion. One final powerful kick, and the door crashed inward. For the first time, Zara saw Samuel Vance clearly, tall as she'd glimpsed from her window, with broad shoulders and strong arms, dark hair falling across a forehead furrowed in concentration. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a square jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes that seemed to see right through her. Those eyes widened slightly as they took in Zara, standing frozen in the center of her small room. Whatever he'd expected, it clearly wasn't the woman before him, tall and full-figured, yes, but with a natural dignity to her bearing and a face that, while pale from years indoors, possessed a striking beauty. "You're—" he began, then seemed to catch himself. "We need to go, now." That noise will have woken someone. Indeed, lights were already appearing in the main house windows. Zara grabbed her bundle and rushed forward, stepping through the broken doorway into open air for the first time in 3 years. The night breeze against her face nearly brought her to her knees with the sheer pleasure of it. Samuel caught her elbow. "Horses are behind the barn. Can you ride?" "I used to," Zara said, finding her footing. "I'll manage." They ran, keeping to the shadows as shouts began to rise behind them. Zara's heart thundered in her chest, her lungs burning with the exertion after years of confinement. Yet there was exhilaration too, fierce and wild as they dodged between outbuildings. Staying low, 2 horses waited, saddled and ready, tethered to a post behind the barn. Samuel helped Zara mount a gentle-looking bay mare, then swung himself onto a powerful black gelding. "Head for the creek," he instructed, pointing toward a line of trees barely visible in the moonlight. "Water will hide our tracks." They set off at a gallop just as the ranch yard erupted into chaos, men shouting, lanterns bobbing, her father's voice rising above it all, bellowing orders. Zara didn't look back, focusing instead on the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the wind in her hair, the stars overhead, so many stars, brighter and more numerous than they'd appeared through her tiny window. Freedom tasted like dust and night air and terror and joy, all mixed together in a heady brew that made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. They reached the creek, the horses splashing into the shallow water, following its winding course away from the ranch. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter. They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. Samuel remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, hand never far from the revolver at his hip. "Where are we going?" Zara finally asked as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. "Mining town called Silver Ridge," Samuel replied. "About 30 miles northeast. Friend of mine works there. He'll help us." "Us," the word slipped out before she could stop it. Samuel glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Unless you've got other plans." "No," Zara admitted. I don't want to be a burden to you. You've already risked so much." "Not a burden," he said simply. Then, after a moment, "Your father was wrong, you know." "About what?" "Everything." Samuel adjusted his hat, squinting at the horizon. "But especially about you being too large. You're exactly as you should be." The words, spoken matter-of-factly without a hint of flattery, brought unexpected tears to Zara's eyes. She blinked them away, focusing on the path ahead. They reached Silver Ridge by mid-morning, a bustling settlement nestled in a narrow valley. Unlike Yarrington with its cattle ranches and farming, Silver Ridge existed solely for the silver mine that burrowed into the mountainside above the town. Men in dirt-covered clothes moved purposefully through the streets, while women hung laundry and children darted between buildings. Samuel led them to a modest cabin on the outskirts of town. A tall, lanky man with a shock of red hair was chopping wood in the yard. He straightened as they approached, his expression changing from curiosity to recognition. "Sam Vance, you son of a gun," he called, setting down his axe. "What brings you back to this hellhole?" "Need a favor, Joe," Samuel replied, dismounting. He helped Zara down from her horse, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "This is Miss Holloway. She needs somewhere to stay for a few days." Joe's eyebrows rose as he took in Zara's disheveled appearance and the dark circles under her eyes. Trouble. "Her father might come looking," Samuel confirmed. "Theodore Holloway, cattle rancher from Yarrington." Joe whistled low. "Heard of him, mean as a rattlesnake with a toothache, they say." "They don't say the half of it," Samuel replied grimly. Joe turned his attention to Zara, his expression softening. "Any friend of Sam's is welcome here, miss. My wife's inside. She'll get you settled." Zara found herself ushered into the small cabin, where Joe's wife, Maggie, a round-faced woman with kind eyes, took one look at her and immediately began heating water for a bath. Soon Zara was clean, dressed in a borrowed nightgown and tucked into a narrow bed in the cabin's single bedroom, which Maggie insisted she take. "Joe and I can make do in the main room," Maggie said firmly, "and your friend Samuel says he's happy with the barn." "He's not exactly my friend," Zara tried to explain. "He worked for my father, he helped me escape." Maggie's expression grew thoughtful. "Escape from your own father?" The entire story spilled out, then her imprisonment, her father's cruelty, Samuel's unexpected intervention. Maggie listened without interruption, her face growing more troubled with each detail. 3 years, she finally said, her voice hushed with horror. "Locked away for 3 years because of your size," she shook her head in disbelief. "And look at you, you're a beautiful woman." Any man with eyes in his head could see that. Zara blushed, unused to compliments after years of her father's constant criticism. "My father doesn't see it that way." "Your father," Maggie said firmly, "is not right in the head. No parent treats their child that way." She patted Zara's hand. "You rest now. You're safe here." Exhausted from the night's events, Zara fell into a deep sleep, waking only when the afternoon sun slanted through the small window. She dressed in clothes. Maggie had left for her a simple blue dress that was a bit short for Zara's height, but otherwise fit well enough, and ventured into the main room. Samuel sat at the table with Joe, both men poring over a map spread between them. He looked up as she entered, his expression warming. "Miss Holloway," he greeted her, rising to his feet. "You look rested." "I feel better," she admitted. "Thank you both for your hospitality." "Sam's been telling me about your situation," Joe said. "We're trying to figure out the safest way to get you to California." "California?" Zara looked between the two men. I'm not sure what I thought." "You can't stay in Nevada territory," Samuel explained gently. "Your father has too much influence here. California gives you a fresh start, somewhere he can't easily reach you." The reality of her situation hit Zara with fresh force. She was truly on her own now, without family, without resources, dependent on the kindness of strangers. The freedom she'd longed for suddenly seemed terrifying in its vastness. "I have no money," she said quietly, "no skills that would earn me a living." "You can read and write?" Joe asked. Zara nodded. "Yes, of course. My mother insisted on my education even after." She trailed off. "That's more than many can say," Joe pointed out. "San Francisco's growing fast, places for a literate woman to find work." "And you wouldn't be alone," Samuel added. "I'd make sure you were settled before I moved on." The casual mention of him moving on pricked at Zara in a way she hadn't expected. Of course, Samuel had his own life, his own plans. He'd never promised more than helping her escape. "When would we leave?" she asked, pushing aside the unexpected feeling of disappointment. "Day after tomorrow," Samuel replied. "There's a stage that runs from here to Reno. From Reno, we can catch the train to California." Zara nodded, trying to absorb the information. In just a few days, she would be further from home than she'd ever been, heading toward a city she'd only read about in books. The prospect was both exhilarating and terrifying. The remainder of the day passed peacefully. Maggie showed Zara around the small cabin and garden, chatting about her life in Silver Ridge. Joe worked in the assay office at the mine, she explained, while she took in mending and laundry for extra money. They had no children yet, though they hoped for them someday. How did you meet Samuel? Zara asked as they shelled peas for supper. Joe and Sam go way back, Maggie replied. They worked the same mine in Colorado for a spell. Sam saved Joe's life when a tunnel collapsed. He seems to make a habit of saving people, Zara observed. Maggie smiled knowingly. Sam's got a good heart. Too good sometimes, gets him into trouble. What do you mean? He can't abide injustice. Sees someone in trouble he has to help, even when it costs him. Maggie paused, giving Zara a sidelong glance. That's how he lost his position with the Texas Rangers 2 years back. Zara's eyes widened. He was a ranger, one of their best, from what Joe says. But he interfered when a wealthy landowner was mistreating Mexican workers, stood up against his own captain who was looking the other way, got himself dismissed for insubordination. This new information cast Samuel in an even more intriguing light, not just a ranch hand with a sense of justice, but a man who had sacrificed his career for his principles. He doesn't talk about it, Maggie continued. Probably wouldn't want me telling you. But I thought you should know the kind of man who's risking his neck for you. That evening, as they sat around the table enjoying Maggie's hearty stew, Joe brought up the subject they'd all been avoiding. Your father's likely got men searching for you already, he said to Zara. Silver Ridge is off the main roads, but it's not that far from Yarrington. We need to be careful. I've been thinking, Samuel added, it might be wise to create a false trail, let word slip that we were headed south toward Carson City. Joe nodded thoughtfully. I can help with that. Few words in the right ears at the saloon tonight. Will it work? Zara asked anxiously. It might buy us time, Samuel replied. Your father can't search everywhere at once. You don't know my father, Zara said softly. He'll never stop looking. His pride won't allow it. The cabin fell silent at her words, the gravity of their situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. Finally, Samuel spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Then we'll just have to be smarter than him. Later, as Maggie and Joe prepared for bed and Samuel made to return to the barn where he was sleeping, Zara caught his arm. Why are you doing this? She asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since he'd first spoken to her through her locked door. The truth, please. Samuel studied her face for a long moment before answering. When I was 15, my sister ran away from home. She was 17, bigger than most girls her age. Our stepfather made her life hell for it, always telling her she was worthless, that no man would want her. His jaw tightened at the memory. She left in the middle of the night. We never saw her again. I'm so sorry, Zara whispered. When I heard you in that shed, heard why you were locked away, I couldn't stand by, not again. Samuel's eyes, dark and serious, held hers. Everyone deserves to choose their own path, Miss Holloway, even if others think they're not fit for it. Impulsively, Zara reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you, and please call me Zara. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Zara then, and I'm Sam to my friends. The next day passed in a flurry of preparation. Maggie helped Zara sew a second dress from fabric she had on hand, while Joe went into town to secure tickets for the stage. Samuel spent most of the day absent, returning in the afternoon with provisions for their journey and new clothes for Zara, practical items like a sturdy pair of boots and a warm cloak. How did you know my size? She asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. Samuel shrugged, a hint of color rising to his cheeks, made an educated guess. Shopkeeper's wife helped. That evening, as they finalized their plans for the morning's departure, a pounding at the door sent them all into alert silence. Joe motioned for Zara and Samuel to retreat to the bedroom while he answered. Through the partially closed door, Zara could see 3 men on the porch, rough-looking fellows with trail dust on their clothes and hands hovering near their weapons. Evening, gentlemen, Joe said calmly. What can I do for you? Looking for a woman, the tallest of the 3 replied. Theodore Holloway's daughter, tall girl, big built, might be traveling with a ranch hand, dark hair, about 30, stolen property, both of them. Zara's blood froze. Stolen property, that's how her father saw her. Haven't seen anyone matching that description, Joe replied easily. But I've been at the assay office most of the day. When were they supposed to have come through? Last night or early this morning, the man said. Holloway's offering $500 for their return. You hear anything, there's a reward in it for you. I'll keep my eyes open, Joe promised. Where can word be sent if I spot them? We're staying at the Silver Nugget tonight, heading south toward Carson City tomorrow. Word is they might be making for the border. After the men left, Joe closed and bolted the door, his expression grim. They're searching every settlement within 50 miles, he reported, and that reward will have people looking who wouldn't normally get involved. We need to leave tonight, Samuel decided. The stage doesn't leave until morning, but we can't risk waiting. The mining company has a wagon heading to Reno at midnight, Joe offered. Carrying silver for the bank, they always have armed guards if you could travel with them. Perfect, Samuel nodded. They'd never expect us to be with a silver shipment. Hastily, they packed their few belongings. Maggie pressed food and a water canteen into Zara's hands along with a small purse of coins. It's not much, she apologized, but it might help until you find your feet in San Francisco. Zara hugged the woman tightly. I can never repay your kindness. Just be happy, Maggie whispered. That's repayment enough. At 11:30, Samuel and Zara slipped out the back door of the cabin and made their way through the shadows to the mine company office at the edge of town. Joe had gone ahead to speak with the wagon master, a friend who owed him a favor. They were admitted to the office, where a gruff-looking man with a silver badge pinned to his vest looked them over critically. Joe says you need discreet transportation to Reno, he said without preamble. Didn't mention you'd be bringing a woman. She's my wife, Samuel lied smoothly, taking Zara's hand in his. We've had some trouble with her family. They don't approve of the match, the wagon master snorted. Family troubles, eh? Well, I don't much care as long as you don't bring those troubles down on my shipment. You'll ride inside the wagon with the silver. It won't be comfortable, but it'll get you to Reno by dawn. Thank you, Zara said sincerely. We're very grateful. The man's stern expression softened slightly as he looked at her. Just stay quiet and do as the guards say if there's any trouble. The wagon was indeed uncomfortable, a heavy, reinforced vehicle with a canvas cover and only small spaces between the wooden crates of silver ore for passengers to wedge themselves. 2 armed guards rode on the bench at the front, while 2 more followed on horseback. As the wagon rumbled out of Silver Ridge, Zara found herself pressed against Samuel in the darkness, the swaying motion making it impossible to maintain any proper distance between them. His arm came around her shoulders to steady her, and she found herself leaning into his solid warmth. Try to sleep if you can, he murmured close to her ear. It's a long journey to Reno. I don't think sleep is possible in these conditions, Zara replied, wincing as the wagon hit a rut in the road. Samuel chuckled, the sound vibrating in his chest against her shoulder. I've slept in worse places. Tell me about them, Zara requested impulsively. Tell me about your travels. In the darkness of the wagon, as it creaked its way across the Nevada wilderness, Samuel told her stories of Texas and the ranger company he'd served with, of the mountains of Colorado where he'd worked silver mines alongside Joe, of the cattle drives across the Great Plains. His voice was low and soothing, painting pictures of places she'd only read about in books. What about you? He asked eventually. What did you do during those 3 years? Dreamed, Zara answered simply. Read every book I could convince my mother to smuggle to me, wrote stories in my journal. Imagined a different life. What kind of different life? She hesitated, never having shared these private dreams with anyone. One where I could walk freely under the open sky, where I could meet people who judged me for my character rather than my appearance, where I might. She trailed off, embarrassed. Might what? Samuel prompted gently. Might be loved, Zara finished quietly. For myself. Samuel was silent for a long moment, then his hand found hers in the darkness, warm and calloused. Everyone deserves that, he said. The wagon continued through the night, the rhythmic motion eventually lulling Zara into a fitful sleep despite her protests that it would be impossible. She woke to find her head resting on Samuel's shoulder, his arm still around her, his own head tilted back against a crate, eyes closed in sleep. In the dim pre-dawn light filtering through the canvas cover, she studied his face, the strong line of his jaw, the faint scar near his right eyebrow, the dark lashes against his cheeks. He looked younger in sleep, the watchful alertness that characterized him when awake momentarily absent. As if sensing her gaze, Samuel's eyes opened, focusing immediately on her face. Neither spoke for a moment, caught in a strange intimacy born of their close quarters and shared danger. The wagon jolted to a stop, breaking the moment. Outside, voices called to one another as the guards prepared to enter Reno. "We're here," Samuel said unnecessarily, withdrawing his arm from around her shoulders. Zara nodded, suddenly shy. "Yes, thank you for making the journey more bearable." A smile touched his lips. "My pleasure." Reno in the early morning light was a startling contrast to sleepy Silver Ridge. Even at this hour, the streets bustled with activity, miners coming off night shifts, merchants setting up stalls, workers heading to the numerous saloons and gambling houses that operated around the clock. The railroad station stood at the center of it all, a symbol of the connection to the wider world beyond. Samuel led Zara through the crowd, his hand firmly holding hers to keep them from being separated. At the ticket office, he purchased 2 passages to Sacramento, the first leg of their journey to San Francisco. "Train leaves in 2 hours, he told her, pocketing the tickets. "We should find somewhere to eat and refresh ourselves." They found a small cafe near the station where Zara gratefully sipped hot coffee and ate a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. The normalcy of sitting in a public place, being served like any other customer, felt strangely surreal after her years of isolation. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked, noticing her distraction. "Just overwhelmed," Zara admitted. "Everything feels so loud and bright and busy." Samuel's expression softened with understanding. "It must be a shock after being confined for so long. We can find a quieter place to wait for the train if you prefer." Zara shook her head firmly. "No, I want this, all of it. The noise, the people, the feeling of being part of the world again." She smiled, a genuine expression that lit her eyes. "I'm not complaining, I'm savoring." Something flickered in Samuel's gaze as he looked at her warmth, and something more, something that made her heart beat a little faster. "You're remarkable, Zara Holloway." Before she could respond, the cafe door burst open, and a group of men entered, trail worn and dusty, with the unmistakable look of men who'd ridden hard through the night. Samuel tensed beside her. "Don't look up," he murmured, "but I believe your father's men have arrived in Reno." Zara froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "How many?" "4 that I can see. Don't recognize them from the ranch, but they have that look." Keeping her face turned away from the door, Zara risked a glance through her lashes. The men were speaking to the cafe owner, who shook his head in response to whatever question they'd asked. One of the men pulled something from his pocket, a piece of paper that he showed to the owner. "They have descriptions," Zara whispered, "or worse, drawings." Samuel nodded almost imperceptibly. "Finish your coffee naturally, then we'll leave through the kitchen. I spotted a back door when we came in." With shaking hands, Zara raised her cup, taking a small sip of the now cooling liquid. She could feel sweat breaking out along her hairline, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone in the cafe must hear it. "Easy," Samuel murmured. "Deep breaths. They haven't spotted us yet." One of the men turned, scanning the cafe's patrons. Zara ducked her head, but not before she caught a glimpse of his face, weathered, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, a face she recognized with sickening clarity. "The one with the scar," she breathed. "That's Jenkins. He's not just a hired hand. He's the man who built my prison." Samuel's expression hardened. "Can he identify you?" "Yes, he's known me since I was a child." Without hesitation, Samuel stood, casually placing himself between Zara and the men at the door. "Time to go," he said, his voice normal but with an undercurrent of urgency. "Leave money on the table and walk toward the kitchen. Don't run, don't look back." Zara did as instructed, placing coins beside her half-empty plate and rising with as much natural grace as she could muster. She walked toward the kitchen, feeling exposed with every step, certain at any moment she would hear Jenkins call her name. "Hey!" A shout from behind them confirmed her fears. That's her, Holloway's daughter. Run, Samuel ordered, all pretense of casualness abandoned. They burst through the kitchen, startling the cook and a dishwasher, and out the back door into an alley. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder: boots on floorboards, the crash of a chair being overturned, angry shouts. Samuel grabbed Zara's hand and pulled her into a sprint down the narrow passageway between buildings. They emerged onto a side street, dodging pedestrians and a loaded wagon. "The station," Zara gasped, struggling to keep up with Samuel's longer strides. "Too obvious," he replied. "They'll have men watching it now, this way." He led her through a maze of streets, taking random turns, doubling back occasionally to confuse their pursuers. Reno was busy enough that they could blend into crowds, but not so large that they could easily disappear. Zara's lungs burned with the exertion, her legs protesting after years of limited movement. Just as she thought she couldn't run another step, Samuel pulled her into a narrow doorway. "Livery stable," he explained between deep breaths. "We need horses, train's not safe now." Inside, the warm, hay-scented air wrapped around them. A stable hand looked up from where he was mucking out a stall, his expression curious at their disheveled appearance and obvious haste. "Need 2 horses," Samuel told him. "Fastest you've got, saddles and basic gear." The young man squinted at them. "Horses ain't cheap, mister, and the boss don't rent to just anyone." Samuel pulled out his remaining money, a sum that represented most of what he'd earned at the Holloway ranch. "Will this cover it?" The stable hand's eyes widened at the sight of the cash. "That'll do nicely." He hesitated. "You folks in some kind of trouble?" "The less you know, the better for you," Samuel replied grimly. 15 minutes later, they were mounted and riding out the back of the stable, taking a trail that led away from Reno toward the mountains to the west. The California border lay in that direction, a natural barrier that might slow their pursuers. They rode hard for hours, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. Zara, despite her earlier exhaustion, found reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The urgency of their flight and the terrifying prospect of being returned to her father or worse. Whatever new prison he had planned for her drove her forward. By midday, they had climbed into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, the air growing cooler as they gained elevation. Samuel finally called a halt beside a small stream, allowing the horses to drink while he assessed their situation. "We've put good distance between us and Reno," he said, scanning the trail behind them, "but they'll be following. Men like Jenkins don't give up easily, especially not with a reward at stake." "What now?" Zara asked, sinking gratefully onto a fallen log. Her entire body ached, and she knew she must look a fright, her hair coming loose from its pins, her borrowed dress dirty and torn in places from branches they'd ridden past. "We keep moving," Samuel replied. "There's a pass through these mountains. If we can reach it by nightfall, we'll be in California by morning. And then," Zara couldn't help asking, Samuel's expression softened as he looked at her. "Then we find you somewhere safe, a place to start over." The unspoken question hung between them: would he stay with her, or would their paths diverge once she was safely in California? Zara wanted to ask, but couldn't find the courage. Samuel had already done more for her than she had any right to expect. Asking for more felt selfish. They rested only briefly before continuing their journey, the trail growing steeper and more challenging as they ascended. The forests around them thickened, pines and firs reaching skyward, their scent sharp and clean in the mountain air. Late in the afternoon, as shadows lengthened across the trail, Samuel suddenly reined in his horse, his posture alert. "What is it?" Zara asked, her voice hushed. "Riders," Samuel replied grimly. "Coming up fast behind us." Fear clutched at Zara's heart. "Jenkins? Can't tell yet. But we can't outrun them on this terrain, these horses are too tired." Samuel scanned their surroundings, then pointed to a narrow gap between boulders off the trail. "There, we can hide the horses and take cover." They dismounted quickly, leading their exhausted mounts into the natural hiding place. The space was tight, forcing them to stand close together as Samuel drew his revolver, checking that it was fully loaded. "If it comes to it," he said quietly, "I want you to take one of the horses and ride on while I hold them off." "No," Zara protested immediately, "I won't leave you." Samuel's eyes met hers, their expression intense. Zara, listen to me. What matters is that you get away. I made a promise to help you find freedom, and I intend to keep it. My freedom isn't worth your life, she insisted, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. Before Samuel could respond, the sound of approaching horses grew louder. He motioned for silence, positioning himself at the edge of their hiding place where he could see without being easily spotted. 4 riders came into view, moving slowly along the trail, clearly searching for signs of their passage. Zara recognized Jenkins at the lead, his scarred face set in determined lines as he studied the ground. They can't have gone far, one of the other men was saying. Horses would leave clear tracks in this soil, Jenkins grunted in agreement. The girl's soft, not used to hard riding, she'll have slowed them down. Beside her, Samuel tensed, his finger hovering near the trigger of his revolver. Zara placed a restraining hand on his arm, silently pleading with him not to reveal their position. 4 against 1 were odds even a former Texas Ranger couldn't overcome. The riders continued past their hiding place, moving further up the trail. Only when they had disappeared around a bend did Samuel relax slightly. They'll realize their mistake soon enough, he said softly. We need to move, but not on the main trail. Is there another way? Samuel nodded. A harder route, but one they might not think to check immediately. Through that ravine to the north. It's rough going, but it will lead us to the pass eventually. They led the horses carefully out of their hiding place, keeping to the cover of the trees as they made their way toward the ravine Samuel had indicated. The going was indeed difficult, steep in places, with loose rocks that threatened the horses' footing. Progress was painfully slow, but at least they were moving away from their pursuers. As dusk settled over the mountains, they found themselves in a small clearing surrounded by dense pines. A fallen tree provided some natural shelter, and Samuel decided it was safe enough to stop for the night. We can't risk a fire, he said apologetically, but we should eat and rest. Tomorrow will be another hard day. From his saddlebag, he produced jerky and hardtack provisions he'd had the foresight to purchase in Reno. They ate in silence, the gravity of their situation weighing on both of them. After their meager meal, Samuel spread his bedroll on the ground and insisted Zara take it. I'll keep watch, he said. You need to sleep. And when will you rest? Zara asked. Samuel shrugged. I'm used to going without. That's not an answer, she persisted. You need sleep as much as I do, more perhaps since you're the one who knows how to get us through these mountains. After some argument, they compromised Zara would sleep first while Samuel kept watch. Then they would switch. As she settled onto the bedroll, wrapped in the blanket that carried Samuel's scent horses and leather and something uniquely him, Zara found herself studying his profile in the fading light. Sam, she said softly. He turned to look at her. Yes, thank you, not just for rescuing me, but for seeing me as a person worth saving. Samuel's expression softened. You were always worth saving, Zara. I'm just glad I was in the right place to do it. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully to Zara. Every sound in the forest, the call of a night bird, the rustle of wind through pine needles startled her awake, certain it was Jenkins and his men discovering their hiding place. During one such moment of wakefulness, she found Samuel looking at her, his gaze thoughtful in the moonlight filtering through the trees. Can't sleep, he asked quietly. Dreams, she admitted. Not pleasant ones. Want to talk about them. Zara hesitated, then sat up, drawing the blanket around her shoulders against the mountain chill. I dreamed I was back in that shed, that all of this, the escape, was just a fantasy I'd created to comfort myself. Samuel moved closer, settling beside her on the bedroll. It's real, you're free. For now, Zara said, voicing the fear that had been haunting her. But what happens when we reach California? My father has money, connections. How long before he finds me again? California's a big place, Samuel reminded her, and your father, for all his influence, is still just one man. His reach has limits. And if he exceeds those limits, Zara pressed, if he never stops looking, Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering. Then we'll deal with that if it happens, but I won't let him take you back, Zara, I promise you that. The conviction in his voice warmed her more than the blanket around her shoulders. she echoed softly. In the dim moonlight, she saw color rise in his cheeks. Aye, that is, if you wanted. I had thought perhaps I might stay in San Francisco for a while to ensure you were properly settled. I'd like that, Zara said, her heart beating faster at the implication that their journey together might not end at the California border. Samuel's eyes, dark and serious, held hers. I should warn you, I'm not a man of means. I've lived by my wits and my skills since leaving the Rangers. I can offer protection, but little else. I don't need means, Zara replied. I need freedom, and she hesitated, then gathered her courage, and I need someone who sees me as I am, not as they wish me to be. Samuel's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. I see you, Zara Holloway. I've seen you from the moment I first heard your voice through that door. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Samuel leaned forward. His lips, when they met hers, were gentle, the kiss a question rather than a demand. Zara answered by leaning into him, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I should have waited, he murmured. Until you were truly safe, until you had choices beyond the ones forced on you by circumstance. Don't, Zara said firmly. Don't diminish this by suggesting I'm only responding out of gratitude or necessity. I may have lived in isolation, but I know my own mind, Samuel Vance. A slow smile spread across his face. I'm beginning to see that. They talked long into the night, sharing histories and hopes in hushed voices beneath the star-scattered sky. Samuel spoke of his childhood in Texas, his sister's disappearance that had shaped so much of his life, his disillusionment with the Rangers when ordered to ignore injustices against those deemed less important by the powerful. Zara told him of her life before confinement, the mother who had tried in her own ineffectual way to protect her daughter, the father whose obsession with appearances had twisted into cruelty, the dreams that had sustained her during 3 years of isolation. Dawn found them both exhausted but somehow lighter, as if the sharing of burdens had diminished their weight. They ate a quick breakfast, packed their meager belongings, and continued their journey toward the mountain pass. The day was clear, the sky a deep blue above the pine-covered slopes. They made good progress through the ravine, eventually rejoining the main trail where it wound through a narrow valley. There was no sign of Jenkins and his men, but Samuel remained vigilant, frequently stopping to listen and check for tracks. They might have gone ahead to the pass, he explained. Thinking to intercept us there. What will we do if they have? Find another way, Samuel replied simply. There's always another path, Zara. Sometimes it's just harder to see. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the approach to the pass, a natural gateway through the mountains, flanked by towering cliffs. Samuel called a halt in a sheltered spot with a good view of the trail ahead. I need to scout, he told Zara, see if they're waiting for us up there. I'll come with you, she offered immediately. Samuel shook his head. Too risky. If something happens, you need to be able to get away. Sam, Zara began to protest, but he cut her off with a gentle finger to her lips. Please, I need to know you're safe. Reluctantly, she agreed to wait with the horses while he moved ahead on foot, keeping to the cover of rocks and trees. She watched his progress until he disappeared from view, then settled in to wait, every muscle tense with anxiety. Time crawled by with excruciating slowness. 1 hour, 2. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, shadows lengthening across the mountainside. Zara paced, her imagination conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios to explain Samuel's prolonged absence. Just as she had determined to go looking for him, consequences be damned, she heard a sound that froze her blood. Horses approaching, not from the direction Samuel had gone, but from behind her. Frantically, she looked for a place to hide, but the terrain offered little cover. The riders would be upon her before she could reach the nearest stand of trees. Making a split-second decision, Zara mounted her horse and urged it forward, hoping to reach Samuel before whoever was coming spotted her. She had barely gone 50 yards when a shout rang out behind her. There she is. Holloway's girl, Zara bent low over her horse's neck, urging it to greater speed. The trail narrowed as it climbed, becoming treacherous with loose rock and steep drop-offs. Behind her, she could hear pursuit gaining 2 riders, maybe 3, their mounts fresher than hers. Rounding a sharp bend, she nearly collided with Samuel, who was running back down the trail toward the sounds of pursuit. His face registered shock, then determination as he grabbed her horse's bridle. "Jenkins?" he asked tersely. "I think so," Zara gasped. 2 or 3 of them coming fast. Samuel made a quick decision. "The pass is clear ahead, but we'll never make it before they catch us. We need to stand and fight." He pointed to a cluster of large boulders beside the trail. "There, it's defensible." They dismounted quickly, Samuel slapping the horses on their rumps to send them galloping up the trail, a distraction for their pursuers, and a removal of the temptation to flee when fighting was their only real option. Behind the boulders, Samuel checked his revolver once more and handed Zara a knife from his boot. "Last resort," he told her grimly. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." They didn't have to wait long. 3 riders came into view around the bend, Jenkins and 2 others from the group they'd seen earlier. All were armed, rifles ready as they scanned the trail ahead. "The horses went that way," one man called, pointing to the fresh tracks continuing up toward the pass. Jenkins wasn't fooled. "Check those rocks," he ordered. "They wouldn't abandon their mounts unless they had to." Samuel tensed beside Zara, his revolver steady in his hand. "When I give the word," he whispered, "I want you to run for the pass. Don't look back, don't hesitate." "I told you before I won't leave you," Zara insisted. Before Samuel could argue further, a voice called out from the trail. "We know you're there, Vance," Jenkins shouted. "Mr. Holloway wants his daughter back. He's willing to forget this whole unfortunate business if you surrender her now." $500 for you to walk away." Samuel's jaw tightened. "And if I don't, then we take her anyway and you don't leave these mountains alive." A tense silence followed. Zara looked at Samuel, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself but for him. "Don't do it," she pleaded quietly. "Don't risk your life for me." Samuel's eyes, when they met hers, held absolute certainty. "Some things are worth the risk." He raised his voice to answer Jenkins. "Mr. Holloway doesn't own his daughter. She's a free woman making her own choices. I suggest you respect that and ride away." Jenkins laughed, an ugly sound that echoed off the cliff faces. "Have it your way." To his companions, he said, "Spread out. Flush them out if you have to." The standoff erupted into violence as one of the men attempted to circle behind their position. Samuel fired, his shot catching the man in the shoulder, spinning him around with a cry of pain. Return fire splintered rock near Zara's head, forcing her to duck lower. What followed was a chaos of gunshots and shouted curses. Samuel moved with the precision of his ranger training, making each bullet count, keeping the attackers pinned down while conserving his limited ammunition. Zara, despite her fear, found herself admiring his calm efficiency even as she flinched at each explosion of gunfire. The tide turned when Jenkins, growing impatient, made a reckless charge toward their position. Samuel's shot caught him in the chest, dropping him to the ground where he lay motionless. The remaining attacker, seeing his companions fallen, retreated down the trail, abandoning the fight. In the sudden silence that followed, Zara's ears rang. Samuel moved to check Jenkins, confirming what was already apparent from the stillness of the man's form. "He's gone," Samuel reported grimly. "The other one I shot is still alive, but he won't be following us anytime soon." Zara stared at Jenkins's body, conflicting emotions washing through her. Relief that the immediate threat was eliminated, horror at the violence, guilt that men had died because of her. Samuel seemed to read her thoughts. "This isn't your fault, Zara. These men made their choices. They chose to hunt a woman for money, to threaten our lives. The consequences are on them, not you." She nodded, accepting the truth of his words even as she struggled with the reality before them. "What now?" "Now we get to the pass before dark. There's a small settlement on the California side where we can rest and regroup." Samuel retrieved their horses, which had stopped further up the trail once the immediate danger of pursuit had passed. As they mounted and continued their journey, Zara glanced back at the scene of the confrontation, now receding behind them. Will there be others? She asked quietly. Probably, Samuel answered honestly. But the farther we get from Nevada, the fewer who will be willing to pursue us. And once we reach San Francisco, he let the thought trail off. Once we reach San Francisco, Zara prompted. Samuel looked at her, something softening in his expression. Once we reach San Francisco, we can decide what comes next, together. The word together carried weight, a promise that warmed Zara despite the cooling mountain air as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Whatever dangers still lay ahead, she would not face them alone. They reached the pass as twilight descended, a narrow saddle between towering peaks. Standing at the highest point, Zara could look back toward Nevada, toward the life of confinement she was leaving behind and forward into California, a land of new possibilities. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. It's beautiful, she said softly, gazing at the forested slopes stretching into the distance, bathed in golden evening light. Samuel nodded, dismounting to stand beside her. New beginnings usually are. Impulsively, Zara reached for his hand. Thank you for everything. Samuel squeezed her fingers gently. The journey's not over yet, I know, she replied, but I wanted to say it anyway. They descended the western side of the pass in near darkness, Samuel leading the way with confidence born of previous travels through these mountains. Eventually, they saw lights twinkling in the valley below the settlement he had mentioned, a welcome sight after their harrowing day. The small town of Pine Creek consisted of little more than a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a handful of cabins clustered around a rushing stream. Despite its size, it offered the essentials they needed. A room at the town's only boarding house, hot food, and most importantly distance from Zara Holloway's influence. The boarding house owner, a widow named Mrs. Bennett, took one look at their trail-worn appearance and set about making them comfortable without asking too many questions. She provided a simple but clean room with 2 narrow beds, hot water for washing, and the promise of a hearty breakfast in the morning. We'll need supplies, Samuel said as they ate a late supper in the boarding house kitchen. And proper clothes for you. We're still a good 3 days' ride from Sacramento, where we can catch the steamer to San Francisco. Zara nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the practicalities of their situation. Her entire life had been circumscribed by her father's ranch. The wider world, with its myriad details and decisions, felt dauntingly unfamiliar. Samuel seemed to sense her uncertainty. One step at a time, he reassured her. We've made it this far, the rest will follow. That night, despite her exhaustion, Zara found sleep elusive. The room, though small, felt vast after years in her shed prison. The bed, while comfortable, was strange. Every creak of the boarding house settling, every distant voice from the saloon down the street brought her to alert wakefulness. From the other bed, Samuel's voice came softly through the darkness. Can't sleep. Too many new sounds, Zara admitted. Too much space. It will get easier, he promised. Your body and mind just need time to adjust to freedom. What if they don't? The question emerged before she could stop it, giving voice to her deepest fear. What if I'm too broken by what happened? What if I can never be normal? The rustle of bedclothes told her Samuel had sat up. First, there's no such thing as normal. Everyone carries their own burdens, their own scars. Second, you're not broken, Zara. Wounded, perhaps, but healing already. I've seen it in how you face each new challenge. His words comforted her, as did the quiet confidence in his voice. Thank you for that, she whispered. For seeing strength in me when I'm not sure I see it myself. It's there, Samuel assured her. It's what helped you survive those 3 years without losing yourself. It's what gave you the courage to leave with me, even though I was a stranger. It's what carries you forward now, despite everything. Zara smiled into the darkness. When you put it that way, perhaps I am stronger than I thought. Much stronger, Samuel agreed. Now try to sleep. Tomorrow brings new challenges. The next morning, refreshed by sleep that had eventually come, they set about acquiring what they needed for the journey ahead. The general store, though small, provided the essentials: practical clothing for Zara, food provisions, and other supplies. Samuel was careful with their limited funds. but insisted on a few items he deemed necessary for Zara's comfort on the trail. As they were loading their purchases onto their horses, a rider came thundering into town, pulling up sharply outside the saloon. Something in the man's urgent manner caught Samuel's attention. "Wait here," he told Zara, moving closer to overhear. When he returned moments later, his expression was grave. "News from Nevada. Your father has increased the reward to $1,000. And he's hired Pinkerton agents to track you down." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. "Pinkertons?" Samuel nodded grimly. "Professional manhunters, they won't give up easily." He made a quick decision. "We need to change our plans. They'll be watching the regular routes to Sacramento and San Francisco. What do we do? Head west, but not directly. Take the less traveled paths, stay away from major settlements." Samuel studied her face. "It will be harder going, longer too." Zara squared her shoulders. "If that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do." They left Pine Creek within the hour, taking a narrow trail that wound through dense forest rather than the main road. Samuel set a moderate pace, mindful of preserving the horse's strength for what promised to be a challenging journey. As they rode, Zara found her thoughts returning to the Pinkertons. Why would my father go to such lengths? She wondered aloud. Surely the embarrassment of a daughter who fled is worse than having one who's merely larger than ideal. Samuel considered this. "It's not about you anymore," he said finally. "It's about his pride. You defied him, escaped his control. Men like Theodore Holloway don't tolerate defiance. So this is punishment," Zara said bitterly. "Partly," Samuel agreed, "but it's also about maintaining his power. If he lets you get away with defying him, what message does that send to everyone else under his control, his workers?" "Your mother." The mention of her mother sent a pang through Zara's heart. Martha Holloway, weak but not cruel, trapped in her own way by the man she had married. "I wish I could have helped her too." "Perhaps someday you can," Samuel suggested. "Once you're established somewhere safe with a new life of your own." The thought gave Zara hope that her freedom might eventually extend to her mother as well, that her escape might be more than just salvation for herself. They traveled steadily for 3 days, avoiding main roads and settlements, camping in secluded spots each night. Despite the hardships of the trail, cold nights, simple food, the constant vigilance required Zara found herself blossoming. Away from her father's criticism and her mother's anxious hovering, she discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. She learned to make camp efficiently, to help care for the horses, to move through wilderness with increasing confidence. Samuel watched her transformation with quiet approval, offering guidance when needed but never underestimating her abilities. Their relationship evolved too, warming and deepening with each shared experience. The kiss they had exchanged that night in the mountains was not repeated, but something more meaningful was growing between them: trust, respect, and an understanding that transcended physical attraction. On the 4th day, as they crested a ridge that gave them their first distant view of the Sacramento Valley, Samuel pulled his horse to a stop beside Zara's. "We're nearly there," he said, pointing to the hazy flatlands below. "Another day's ride to Sacramento, then the steamer to San Francisco." Zara surveyed the vast landscape stretching before them, so different from the Nevada desert and mountains she had known all her life. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "So green." "California's a land of contrasts," Samuel told her. "Desert and forest, mountain and valley, ocean and plain. A good place for new beginnings." As they made their way down from the ridge, following a stream that would eventually lead them to more traveled routes, Zara found herself thinking about those new beginnings. What would she do in San Francisco? How would she support herself? And what role would Samuel play in this new life she was creating? They made camp early that evening beside the stream, in a small clearing sheltered by ancient oaks. As they sat by the fire after their simple meal, Zara finally gave voice to the questions that had been troubling her. "What happens when we reach San Francisco?" she asked. "What will I do there?" Samuel looked up from where he was cleaning his revolver. "Whatever you choose," he said simply. "That's the gift of freedom choice." "But practically speaking," Zara pressed. "I have no money, no skills that would earn a living. You underestimate yourself, Samuel replied. You're educated, articulate. You could work as a teacher, perhaps, or in a shop. Or, he hesitated, then continued more cautiously, or you could marry. The word hung between them, loaded with implications. Zara met his gaze steadily. Is that a proposal, Mr. Vance? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. If it were, would your answer depend on practical considerations, on whether I could provide for you? No, Zara said honestly. It would depend on love. Samuel set aside his revolver and moved to sit beside her on the fallen log she had chosen as a seat. And do you think love is possible? Between two people who have known each other such a short time, under such unusual circumstances? Zara considered this carefully. I think extraordinary circumstances can reveal a person's true character more quickly than years of ordinary interaction. I've seen who you are, Samuel Vance, your courage, your integrity, your kindness. Those aren't qualities that change with time or situation. Samuel took her hand, his expression serious. I feel the same about you. Your resilience, your determination, your capacity for joy even after everything you've endured. These are the foundations of who you are. Then perhaps, Zara said softly, love is not only possible but already present. Samuel's free hand came up to cup her cheek. I believe it is. He leaned forward, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about his feelings. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Zara Holloway. And yes, that was a proposal, though perhaps not delivered with the eloquence you deserve. Joy bubbled up inside Zara, bright and unexpected. I love you too, and yes, I will marry you, eloquence notwithstanding. Their laughter mingled in the gathering dusk, a sound of pure happiness that seemed to echo across the wilderness around them. Later, as they lay in their separate bedrolls beneath the star-scattered sky, Zara felt a peace she had never known before, not just the absence of fear or confinement, but the positive presence of hope, of belonging, of being truly seen and valued. They reached Sacramento the following afternoon, a bustling river port that served as a gateway to the goldfields and beyond to San Francisco. After the wilderness they had traversed, the city seemed overwhelmingly busy, streets crowded with wagons and pedestrians, the waterfront alive with stevedores loading and unloading the steamers that plied the river. Samuel led Zara to a modest hotel near the docks where they secured separate rooms for propriety's sake. The steamer leaves tomorrow morning, he told her. One night here, then on to San Francisco. That evening, they dined in the hotel's small restaurant, celebrating their engagement and the near completion of their journey. Zara wore one of her new dresses, a simple blue cotton that nevertheless felt luxurious after days on the trail. Samuel, having visited a barber that afternoon, looked freshly groomed and handsome in a clean shirt. To new beginnings, he toasted, raising his glass of wine. And to freedom, Zara added, touching her glass to his. As they ate, they discussed their plans for San Francisco, finding lodging, seeking work, eventually a small ceremony to formalize their engagement. The future stretched before them, no longer threatening but full of promise. There's something I've been meaning to ask, Zara said as they lingered over coffee. That first night at the Holloway Ranch when you spoke to me through the door, why did you investigate at all? What made you suspect someone was locked in that shed? Samuel's expression grew thoughtful. I was walking the property, getting the lay of the land as I always do in a new place. I noticed the shed had a heavy lock, which seemed odd for a storage building, and there were fresh water stains beneath the door, as if someone had recently brought water inside. He shrugged. I've learned to pay attention to details that don't quite fit. Thank goodness you did, Zara said softly. They retired early, needing rest before the final leg of their journey. In her room, Zara stood at the window, watching the lights of Sacramento reflect on the river's dark surface. So much had changed in the span of a week, from imprisonment to freedom, from isolation to love, from despair to hope. The steamer to San Francisco departed promptly at 9 the next morning, a grand vessel called the Capital that carried passengers and freight between the two cities. Samuel secured them places on the upper deck, where they could enjoy the scenery as the boat made its way down the Sacramento River toward the bay. It's a journey of about 6 hours, he told Zara as they settled into their deck chairs. We'll pass through the Delta, then into San Francisco Bay. The city itself is built on hills overlooking the water, quite a sight when you first see it. Zara could barely contain her excitement. I've read about San Francisco, but I never thought I'd actually see it. The journey was everything she had hoped for, the wide river giving way to the even broader expanse of the bay. The distant glimpses of small settlements along the shores, the seabirds wheeling overhead. Other passengers came and went on the deck around them, but Zara and Samuel remained in their chosen spot, absorbed in the changing scenery and each other's company. As they neared San Francisco, Samuel pointed out landmarks: Alcatraz Island, the Golden Gate, and finally the city itself, rising on its famous hills, buildings catching the afternoon sunlight. It's magnificent, Zara breathed, taking in the bustling waterfront, the forest of ship masts in the harbor, the streets climbing steeply up from the bay. It's home, Samuel said simply, or it will be. They disembarked into the controlled chaos of the San Francisco docks, sailors, merchants, travelers, and locals, all moving with purpose through the waterfront district. Samuel kept a protective arm around Zara as he guided her through the crowd toward a cab stand. We'll find lodging first, he decided. I know of a respectable boarding house in a quieter part of the city. The cab took them away from the waterfront, climbing the steep streets to a neighborhood of modest but well-maintained houses. The boarding house Samuel had mentioned turned out to be a 3-story Victorian, painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. The proprietress, Mrs. Fletcher, greeted them warmly when Samuel introduced himself as a friend of a former tenant. I have 2 rooms available, she told them after hearing their carefully edited story that they were recently engaged, having met in Nevada and seeking to establish themselves in San Francisco. Not adjoining, I'm afraid, but both on the 2nd floor. Breakfast is included, and dinner can be arranged for a small additional fee. With lodging secured, Samuel and Zara settled into their new surroundings. The rooms, though small, were clean and comfortably furnished, a vast improvement over the shed that had been Zara's prison for 3 years. That evening, they dined with the other boarders in Mrs. Fletcher's dining room, answering polite questions about their backgrounds and plans with carefully constructed answers that contained enough truth to be believable without revealing the full extent of their circumstances. After dinner, they took a short walk around the neighborhood, Samuel pointing out local landmarks and services they might need. There's a dressmaker on the corner, he noted, and a small library 2 blocks over, a church just there if you're inclined. Zara absorbed it all eagerly, already imagining how their life might unfold in this vibrant city. And work, she asked, for both of us. I have some contacts in the shipping business, Samuel replied, men who might have use for someone with my experience. As for you, he considered. The city has growing schools. With your education, you might find a position as a teacher's assistant, perhaps. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as they established themselves in their new home. Samuel found work with a shipping company that supplied the goldfields, a position that utilized his knowledge of horses and his ability to handle men. Zara, after several interviews, secured a position as an assistant in a small private school for girls, where her education and gentle manner impressed the headmistress. They were married on a sunny Saturday in October, in a simple ceremony at the church near their boarding house. Joe and Maggie made the journey from Silver Ridge to stand as witnesses, bringing with them news that Theodore Holloway had eventually called off the Pinkerton agents, the cost of the continued search finally outweighing his pride. He's telling everyone you died, Joe reported. Easier for him to accept than admitting you escaped and found happiness, I guess. Zara received this news with a mixture of sadness and relief. And my mother, still at the ranch from what we heard, Maggie said gently, but perhaps someday. The possibility remained unspoken, but understood that perhaps someday Martha Holloway might find her own courage to leave, knowing her daughter had blazed the trail. After the wedding, Samuel and Zara moved into a small house they had rented, a cottage with a view of the bay from its tiny back garden. It was there, on a crisp evening 6 months later, that Zara shared the news she had suspected for several weeks: a baby. Samuel repeated, his face lighting with joy when she told him. "You're certain?" "The doctor confirmed it this morning," Zara nodded, her hands resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Due in November." Samuel gathered her into his arms, his embrace gentle as if she had suddenly become fragile. "I never thought I could be this happy," he murmured against her hair. "Nor I," Zara admitted. "After those years locked away, I couldn't imagine a future like this: freedom, purpose, love, and now a child." Their son, Thomas, was born on a stormy November night, a healthy, robust baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Holding him in her arms, Zara marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the span of 18 months, from prisoner to wife and mother, from isolation to connection, from hopelessness to joy. "He's perfect," Samuel said, sitting beside her on the bed, his finger caught in his son's tiny but surprisingly strong grip. "Yes," Zara agreed, watching the two people she loved most in the world. "Perfect." As Thomas grew, so did their family's prosperity. Samuel's work with the shipping company led to a partnership, while Zara's position at the school evolved into a full teaching role. They moved to a larger house as their family expanded, a daughter, Emma, joining them 2 years after Thomas, followed by another son, William, 2 years later. On the 5th anniversary of their arrival in San Francisco, as they sat in their garden watching their children play, a letter arrived that Zara had both hoped for and feared would never come. The handwriting on the envelope, shaky but familiar, brought tears to her eyes before she even broke the seal. "Mother," she whispered, opening the letter with trembling fingers. Samuel moved to sit beside her on the garden bench, his arm around her shoulders as she read. "My dearest Zara, I pray this letter finds you, though I send it with little hope. The man who carries it for me, Dr. Bennett, who attended your father in his final illness, has promised to make inquiries in San Francisco, but the city is large and 5 years have passed. Yes, your father is gone, taken by a fever 3 weeks ago. In his delirium at the end, he spoke your name, though whether in anger or regret, I cannot say. With his passing, I find myself at a crossroads. The ranch is to be sold, the proceeds divided among your father's business partners. I am provided for with a modest sum, enough to establish myself elsewhere if I choose. If this letter reaches you, know that not a day has passed that I have not thought of you and prayed for your safety. I was a coward when you needed courage, and that failure will haunt me always. But perhaps it is not too late for us to know each other again, if you can find it in your heart to forgive. I will be staying with my sister in Sacramento for the coming month. After that, I do not know where life will take me. Your loving mother, Martha Holloway." Tears streamed down Zara's face as she finished reading. "She's alive," she said, looking up at Samuel, "and free." "Will you go to her?" he asked gently. "Yes," Zara decided without hesitation. "To Sacramento. I want her to meet you, to know her grandchildren." She looked out at Thomas, Emma, and William, playing their invented games beneath the apple tree they had planted when they first moved into the house. "I want her to see that happiness was possible after all." The reunion, when it came 2 weeks later in a small hotel in Sacramento, was both painful and healing. Martha Holloway had aged beyond her years, her once dark hair now completely silver, her face lined with the evidence of a difficult life. When she saw Zara, vibrant and confident with Samuel and the children beside her, the older woman broke down, years of suppressed emotion finally finding release. "I'm so sorry," she wept as Zara held her. "So very sorry I didn't protect you, that I didn't find the courage to help you escape." "It's in the past," Zara assured her. "What matters is now. The future." That future included Martha Holloway moving to San Francisco, establishing herself in a small apartment near her daughter's family. The wounds of the past healed slowly but steadily as grandmother and grandchildren formed bonds, as mother and daughter rediscovered their relationship on new, more equal terms. as Samuel welcomed this new addition to their family with the same quiet strength that had characterized his initial rescue of Zara. 10 years after Samuel Vance broke down the door of her prison, Zara stood at the window of their home, a comfortable house on Russian Hill with a view of the bay, and watched as he played with their children and two young nieces, the daughters of Samuel's long-lost sister, whom they had finally located in Oregon 3 years earlier. The family gathering celebrated multiple joys: the publication of Zara's first book, a collection of stories for children that drew on her experiences as a teacher, Samuel's recent promotion to managing partner in the shipping firm, and the completion of Martha's new cottage in the garden behind their house, a place where she could have independence while remaining close to her family. As twilight settled over San Francisco Bay, Samuel came to stand beside Zara at the window, his arm slipping around her waist in a gesture that had become so familiar and yet never lost its power to comfort and connect them. "Happy?" he asked simply. Zara leaned into his embrace, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment, the courage it had taken to flee, the challenges they had overcome, the life they had built together. "Beyond words," she replied, turning to face the man who had seen her value when she herself had begun to doubt it. "You broke more than a door that night, Samuel Vance. You broke the chains I didn't even know I was wearing." Samuel smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening, lines earned through years of laughter and occasionally tears, through the raising of children and the building of a life rich with meaning and connection. "We broke them together," he corrected gently. "I just provided the opportunity." "You found the courage." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared over San Francisco Bay, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her father had been wrong about everything: her worth, her potential, her future. The body he had deemed too large, too inappropriate, had carried 3 children into the world. The woman he had hidden away as an embarrassment had become a respected teacher and author. The daughter he had tried to diminish had instead grown into the fullness of her being, embraced by a community that valued her precisely as she was. In finding freedom, Zara Holloway Vance had discovered not just her own strength, but the transformative power of being truly seen by Samuel first, and eventually by herself. And in that seeing lay the greatest liberation of all.